Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ReConnect with Plant Wisdom. It's me, Tigria Gardenia. Today's guest is challenging, but in a good way. In a good way. I had the most delightful conversation with Matthew Mehuys. And I am just really excited about bringing this type of conversation to you because I feel like sometimes, and I do this, I'm guilty of this, right? I listen to so many different speakers and I have so many conversations with different people, and each one of us expresses our relationship with plants in a very different way. But it's really easy for us to especially if we've adopted a certain type of vocabulary and we look at things in a certain way, it's very easy to kind of judge the other person as if the words that they're using have the same meaning than the words you're using. And in this particular case, that is exactly kind of what happened at the beginning, because I feel like Matthew is somebody who is doing really beautiful work, and his vocabulary matches that of his clients and of the people he works with and all these different aspects, where my vocabulary, of course, has already shifted based on you and based on all my research and everything that I have done. And so but I also find, language to be super important, especially in the types of topics that he and I were talking about, which is really about what does it mean to design a garden? What is the relationship of the human being to the plants that are part of that garden? And, who is the parent and who is the child, as you will hear that we get into. So this is really a wonderful conversation that touches on, what it means to bring this communication and this relationship with plants into a more corporate environment or into an environment of people who maybe haven't started their plant reawakening, but who have an inkling that they want something. And how do we, as the professionals that are here to help them through this transition in different ways? For example, for Matthew, as a landscape architect and as a garden designer, it's one way of doing it. And me, of course, as a plant educator, you might say, or a plant advocacy ambassador, do it in another way. So I'm really excited for you to just listen to this. I want to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear, where do you see Matthew in the way that Matthew speaks and what it is that Matthew does in relation to everything else that we're talking about our interspecies relationship. So with that, I present to you episode 121, Interspecies Garden Relationships with Matthew Mehuys. Welcome to Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. I'm your host, Tigria Gardenia, nature-inspired mentor, certified life coach, and the founder of the Naturally Conscious community. For over a decade, I've been known as a world ambassador for plant advocacy, working closely with plants to share their practical wisdom to help you consciously embody the elements of life that nourish your evolution. In this podcast, I delve into ancient and modern knowledge from biology to spirituality about the wondrous ways of plants. Together, we'll explore how ecosystem thinking helps you overcome limiting beliefs, understand the true nature of relationships, and live an authentic, impactful life. All right, Matthew, we're already off to a great start because you asked me a beautiful question at the very beginning, which is, what do we need to do in order to make this the best episode ever? And I love that because it's already like bringing up a whole series of questions I want to ask you. But before I start asking you all these questions, can you tell my audience who is Matthew?
Yeah, Tigrila, first of all, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk plants and saving the world and doing a lot of things on a high pipe. So, yeah, my backstory, I've tried to keep it short. Grew up on a family farm. My brother and father are farmers. I'm very passionate about agriculture. When I was 3 years old, I was so fascinated about how plants can grow, like seed in the ground. Wow, how is this possible? Like, this is the 3 year old's first thoughts, I would say. By the time I was 5, I told my parents I'm going to start my own vegetable garden because on our farm at the time there was mostly cash crops and cattle. We've changed it now since we're going into a more regenerative farm and we have a lot of gardens and visitor center, but that we can talk about more later. But then I started growing veggies, and the first thing I did was radishes, and it was a success story. It was so easy. like growing radishes is one of the easiest fetch. And then I thought it's super easy. So, and then I said, okay, I'll get all the other seeds, tomato, lettuce, everything, because I was passionate about it. And I prepared my soil. My grandmother came. We added like compost because the soil was it's a very heavy clay soil where I grew up, and it actually used to be ocean. And the monks in the 12th, 11th, 13th century they pushed back the ocean, so it's very rich soil, but it's like a brick when it dries, and very muddy when it's rainy. So it was a struggle, and but still, I got everything in the ground, and I came and I thought gardening is so easy. I'll come back in a couple of weeks to see everything. Yeah, I can already harvest my tomatoes. Like in my mind, I was like, okay. I came back, and my little garden was completely overgrown by weeds that were higher, taller than myself, like quite nasty weeds, like some were even poisonous. I still remember my dad saying that. But why am I telling you this story? That's where everything started, and I only could connect the dots looking backwards. Is like I went on in life. I studied a bachelor in landscape architecture in Belgium, which was focused on garden design. I finished that. I was like, I had a burning desire to do something more, not just design gardens, and I'm still doing that. I love doing that. But I said, okay, I want to do more bigger projects. So I went to Germany to study a master degree in landscape architecture, and I got my master degrees. I thought like this is it. This is what everybody expects of me. Get a good degree and start a 9 to 5 job. I got into that 9 to 5 thing, and half year in my first job, which I was proud of, I become like depressed, and I'm like what the hell is this? Like I didn't sign up for this. I want to create. I'm creative. I want to help people, and yeah, I still did it for 2.5 years, but that was it. I quit my job. I had some money saved up. I packed my backpack and I went on a quest around the world to visit some of the most amazing projects that have to do with regeneration, ecology, I went to a bunch of eco resorts, to farms. I volunteered. I did permaculture trainings. I kind of did it all, and I know I had a good lifestyle. I had like my laptop. I had a freelance job, which I was only working 1 day a week, which allowed me to keep traveling because I was like in South America and Indonesia, living like sleeping in hammocks, and like really this I would say this was my hippie era, and I loved it. And at some point I said I'm gonna go to Ecuador to the Amazon rainforest. I heard about it and I want to see what it's like. And the night before we want to go to the Amazon rainforest, we had like something booked through a travel agency. I wasn't too excited about it, but it was like limited time. And the night before, I was in in a hostel, and somebody comes to us and, oh, are you going to the Amazon rainforest? Yeah, oh, we have this guide. He's like an indigenous. He's worked with National Geographic. Here, you should contact this guy. I was like, yeah, let's do that. So you can't find him on internet anywhere. So I spent 3 days with this guy in a boat in the depth of the Amazon rainforest. Like, it was about 24 hours travel, and this guy was so amazing. He could make the sounds of every animal, like crocodiles, birds, like you name it. He could do it, and he saw things that nobody saw. He's like pointing to a branch, and like, look, it's a bird. Like, no, it's a branch, and it was an owl that was shaped as a branch. I was like, wow, and that left such a deep impression on me. Like the diversity, like what a beautiful planet do we have. Like these wildlife areas we have to protect. This is like this is the green lung of our planet. And I was just like 3 days traveling, and I went back to Quito, the capital in Ecuador, and I thought like I love my life, so I'm just gonna keep doing this. I was planning to go to Mexico because I love surfing. I wanted to go there, but nature had a different course. God, the universe, whatever you believe in, had a different plan for me. And they said that I got dengue from that travel in the Amazon rainforest,
Oh.
and it's like malaria. They call it the bone breakers disease. It was horrible. I was sick for about a month, and from that moment, my life actually went really down. It was like I I, I didn't have much money left. My girlfriend dumped me. I had to move back with my parents back to Belgium because I was sick, and I couldn't afford. Like I couldn't stay there because if you get stung twice, it's really that it can be deadly. But in this what I like to call the dark night of the soul that you might be familiar with as well. This was, and again, it's in retrospect because it was a really tough time. I got into my why. Why am I here? And this is the question. Like you asked me, how can we do it well? I was like, why am I on this planet? What am I doing here? And from those ideas, and I also worked with a mentor who helped me, guiding me through, like also a lot of blockages. I said like I'm gonna make sure that we can protect those areas and the other areas in the world that we have. We should also make that as natural as possible. So I started my own business in garden design because I knew that, and I know okay, if you get into business, you can actually make an impact, like a direct impact. We don't have to wait for policies or things that are way too slow. Business is like you can have an immediate impact. So I did that, and the business. We're now 4 years in the business. We have clients in 4 continents. I have an online masterclass where people can learn how to do it, how to create a regenerative garden themselves. I'm now looking to work with developers to do big scale developments based on the regenerative principles. So yeah, I'm living my dream. It's not a, let's say it's not always rainbows and sunshine when you run a business. I think you know that. But I'm super
Mhm.
happy that I'm really right in the spot. And I'm now actually living in the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic. I made it my home because I still travel a lot to Canada and to Europe. So yeah, that's in a nutshell what's been happening in the last
I
several
love
years. So not
journeys
a
like
lot,
this. And I love journeys like this because they help us understand that, we don't just, how do I say this? We're not like born with all the answers and all of a sudden life takes this linear path. And even when you're passionate about something, it doesn't mean, like, I started off in high tech, and when I first started, I never even planned to go into technology. And I went into tech because a good friend of mine basically found me at a conference, and I was just getting ready to graduate from college, from university. And she was like, you know what? You would really be good at my job, because she wanted to move on to another role in the company. And so she was like, I'm going to put your name up for my job. And I had no idea, but it turned out to be, doing audio and video online in the really early days of the internet. And I remember at one point I was sitting in a meeting space where I was helping a group of ladies listen to a symphony from around the world. Like, I don't even remember where it was being broadcast. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my goodness, this is what I want. I want people to be able to experience, like, the technology, but in a way that nourishes them so much. In that case, it was nourishing them with music. And as I fast forward to today, like you said, you only see things in hindsight. And I think about my own journey with, the music of the plants, and then eventually the plants and all this work. It is easy
so
for
cool.
those things to derail, to go off onto like a path that you're like, I studied all this, I did all this work, I did it to help, to create something that was good for the world. And then I end up in this place that's not taking me there. So therefore, I have to switch gears. And so I love that you
Mhm.
went off on that walkabout, as we call it, that journey around to try to understand yourself. So here's my question.
Mhm.
In all this, right now, as you work on these regenerative projects, which are, regenerative garden design and such, where do the plants fit in? Like, I mean, obviously you're using plants because it's a garden, but there's got to be more. You don't go all the way to the Amazon to have a relationship with plants and then walk home and, I don't know, go to the garden variety, like, garden store, and pick up a bunch of plants and just, insert them into the ground. Like, there's got to be more to it. Where is your relationship with plants today?
Mm. Very good question. It's a tough one because the way I look at it is that at the moment I don't have a project myself. Like I've come to the Azores to really get into a project myself, but still today I feel like I'm in a place that I have to serve people more. Like I've thought a long time about like okay I want to like I came on this planet like to I want to make sure that this planet is very inhabitable for the future for many generations to come. I guess my big why. And I started to think, okay, how can I do that? Okay, I can make my own project, but that has a limited impact. And you might say, okay, people might come and visit, and but so it wasn't enough for me. So I thought I need to serve, and I thought more about it. Like I really want to do this project, and I was so focused on the projects and having the impact that I wasn't focused on the people. And now I'm so committed to helping people because that's the only way I can get to my goal, is to inspire as many people, to empower as many people. Like I still do garden designs, and I will keep doing it because I love it. I love creation, and I love picking plants and finding the right plants for the right location, working with nurseries, and or finding other ways that you could do like a regeneration more naturally, and then go with this the flow of succession. Like this is still what I do, but I now created a masterclass, and that's more where I can give it to other people, and then they can give it to their garden. Or some of my students started their own garden design business. So I think even if I still have a direct connection with plants, and I talk to plants, I definitely, like, there's science behind it that however you treat your plants, this, like, the vibration is going to increase. And somebody actually told me yesterday, it's my girlfriend who's working for another big podcast called Wellness and Wisdom by Josh Trent, which is quite big in the US. And they had someone on the show that said, okay, every weed that comes in your garden, that is actually a plant that wants to serve you.
Hmm.
Like every weed has specific minerals, and somebody told me that these plants appear because they want to help you. So I think that's very beautiful. So, but I'm working on a project to also do something myself. I just, for now, I'm dedicated to helping people create the connection with plants themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is such an important place because so, my master's degree is really unique because it's plant social innovation and design. And
Mhm.
so I became and I kind of came into that because I started when I first started studying about plant intelligence and working connected with plants, I went down the biomimicry, route. So biomimicry or
Nice.
bio-inspired design. And I fell in love with the whole concept of how is it that plants work with us in the built environment. And I don't
Mhm.
I don't talk about it as much anymore because I'm outside of a lot of those projects. I worked on several EU based projects also connected to biomimicry and water loops and the built environment and all these different perspectives. And I am still thoroughly convinced, and I've just recently saw something quite beautiful, a beautiful project that's being done in the United States around how does the plant world through the metaphor of the garden or through the application of a garden enter into our shared spaces, especially in urban environments, and but in a way that allows relationship to happen. Because most current, and you know this better than I do, most current landscape design, especially inside of cities, right, when we're talking about cities, is to a certain extent sterile, right? The whole
Mhm.
premise is I create this thing that supposedly is aesthetically beautiful,
Mhm.
although I would argue that. And yet there's a very definitive separation between the human part of it and the plant part. In other words, look but don't touch. See what I am. And this is really why ecofeminism as a whole discipline of study is born, because it's very similar to the way women have been treated in the idea of look, look at me. I'm supposed to be constrained. I have to wear this corset. I have to put on this makeup. I have to do all these things. And I hold you in place and to be this stylized ideal of beauty, but I do not allow you to express yourself. And when you do, I call that wild and bad and something that you
Mhm.
shouldn't be. When in reality, and that's what our garden spaces inside of cities often are. There's this thing. I remember having a conversation with my landscape gardening professor when I did my master's, we were talking about the famous, what are they called? Foresta Verticale, like the two towers in
The
Milan, right?
gardens
That
of
everybody,
Babylon.
exact Boeri. Yeah. Boeri's are, and everybody like, I mean, okay, they have this aspect of, sure, they're green, but the person who lives in the apartment is not allowed to have any contact with the plant right outside their window. They're taken care of by a crane that has been installed on the top of each of the towers. And our professor didn't want to say anything because she's very polite, but we were like, no, 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 you got to tell us what you really think about this place. And she went off on a rant because she's like, even when you walk up to the building, there's these beautiful planters, and the plants he planted are not native. They die in this area. They're constantly being replaced. So people are living in this beautiful thing, but there's no relationship happening. And so I'm so
Yeah.
curious as to whether or not, like, in your work, how are you helping people bridge that? Like, when people are thinking about their own garden design, how do we break that barrier where it's not, I, human, put you in and then you sit there beautiful, but instead it's, there's a relationship happening here, and we're supposed to be interacting on a chemical level, on an energetic level, an electromagnetic level, on a physical level, even when it's appropriate. Does that even make any sense?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, a lot. Your whole story and question reminded me of a lecture we had on the history of gardens. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we go back in history, the first garden that was ever created is the Hortus Inclusius, which is like a walled garden.
Right.
So, this was in the time where nature was very hostile for people at that time, because we had wild, like whole Europe was still mostly forests. You had wolves, bears, like it was not the safest environment to just wander around in. So what the walled garden was a representation of, like, okay, outside there's the crazy wild world that we are very scared of, and inside we'll create something that we can tame. And that went on still very long into history, like the French gardens. It's like a show off of how we dominate nature. That's what the French garden represents. It also shows
Yep.
like wealth. I can afford something. I can afford something that can be maintained, like big pieces of lawn that are mowed. It's more like a status symbol. Interestingly enough, around that same time, and or no, that's a bit later. This was in the 1800s. It became like a flex or a symbol of wealth was to collect plants from all over the world, which was the creation of the yeah, botanical gardens, botanical parks. They were all in the 1800s, which
Yep.
is
And the
still a cool
herbarium.
thing. You know, you have a lot of money and you say, okay, I want to have all the plants of the world. Why not? Kind of like that. That idea, but still mostly was to dominate nature. And then we are now in the you could say post-industrial times where we've completely dominated nature and we're completely disconnected from nature because of the industrial revolution, because of collapse of ecosystems, and yeah, there's just so little nature left that now the trend would be to reverse that and actually make your garden an environment that supports nature
Mm-hmm.
and supports biodiversity. And this is the big trend. Like a lot of the naturalistic gardens, like Piet Oudolf is a famous garden designer. Even you could still argue how natural it is, but it looks natural. That's the least you could say. So now people are getting more connected to a more wilder looking garden, which is great. But it also comes with a few challenges. Like if you just plant things randomly and then you let it go, then yeah, that's not going to work. So you need the knowledge of how nature works, and that's what I teach in my masterclass. Like, okay, first of all, let's understand how nature works. How does succession work? How do plants, yeah, how does a plant grow? Why do weeds come? That's like a very important knowledge, and it's also in my book, 12 Universal Laws of Nature. So when we can then understand nature, we can use that to our own advantage in the garden. And so, how I do that with my clients and my students, it's like, okay, you first have to get really clear on what you want. What's your vision? Like, why do you even want the garden? Do you want edible plants? Do you want flowers? Do you want to create a sanctuary for birds, for butterflies? Like, what excites you? Because I see a lot of garden designers, architects do that as well. They come into a garden and say, "Oh, here I'm going to put that, and there I'm going to put this, and if I put that there, it's going to be really beautiful." But they don't listen to the clients, or they don't listen to themselves. In case you're like a student of a class, because then everybody thinks you have to have raised beds with vegetables. I don't see the need for that because it's a lot of work. It's very expensive, and you could better go to a farmer's market and support a farmer to buy your veggies. Which I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because like for example, I love growing vegetables. I'm very passionate about it. I was 5 years old, so it's kind of in my genes. So you have to get clear on what you want, and then use that um, to set or use that vision to then create it in the garden. And usually, how I do it with my one-on-one clients is I sell them what they want. Like, you want low maintenance. Most of them, they want a low maintenance garden. They want flowers. Like, I had this one project, and I'll keep referring to it because it's a shifting moment in my business. What I had gathered a lot of information from taking courses, applying certain things, and I had this one client. She loved what I did. She said, I want you to create a garden that has flowers, edible plants, herbs. I love attracting butterflies. I want also vegetables. She made a whole list, and she finished and she said, but I also want it to be really low in maintenance because I have a very busy job. And I kind of laughed to it because up until that point, I was like, no, there's no way that you can make a low maintenance garden that is also so diverse. But something came to me, is like, you know what? Let's take the challenge, and I'm going to create that and make it super low in maintenance. So we've applied all the knowledge that I gathered, which is mostly about around soil health and supporting the plants to grow, and picking the right plant for the right location. And this garden, which is a 300 square meter garden, which is about 3,200 square feet, it's not huge, it's not small. It takes 12 hours of maintenance in 9 months, which is the growing season in Belgium. So it's super low in maintenance, and she has everything she wants. So um, it's definitely possible. You just need to tap into the knowledge of how nature works, because in nature there is no maintenance or very little. You have grazing animals that eat
Mm.
here and there. That's kind of how you should maintain your garden as well. Like, you graze here and there and change some things, like trimming a little bit here and there, and then you keep that beauty going.
But before we go into that, let's take a brief pause so that I can share with you one of our eco conscious business partners. If you're ready to elevate your podcasting game, Zencastr is the way to go. I love how easy it is. You just log in through your browser and start recording high quality sound and video with your guests. No more technical headaches. I've got peace of mind knowing that Zencastr's multi-layered backup ensures my sessions are always secure, even if my connection gets a little wobbly, which often happens living in the mountains. And let's be real, who hasn't worried about how they sound? Zencastr's post-production magic helps me achieve the perfect podcast loudness, and cutting out background noise is just a click away. But what I love most is that Zencastr is an all-in-one platform. No more juggling multiple tools and services. With Zencastr, I create, produce, and distribute my podcast to Spotify and Apple and other major platforms, all in one place. So join me to make your podcasting journey effortless and enjoyable. Go to tigriagardenia.com/Zencastr to get my coupon code NCC Sprout, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same experience as I do for all of my podcasting needs. And it's time to share your story. Okay, I'm going to challenge you. And I told you I would do this. So I'm going to challenge you because you keep using an
Yeah, let's do it. I
expression.
love it.
You keep using an expression that, in my opinion, it's something you learned to say in this way.
Uh-huh.
But based on everything I know about you from this meeting and from when we spoke before, I don't really
Mhm.
think it's how you think about it, but I feel like it's just the words that you're used to using. So you keep saying knowledge of how nature works. And, when you understand how nature, and you just keep using nature as if it's something outside of you. And recently I've had several of my guests, and been having this running conversation, which is that for people who grow up on farms of whatever sort, people who grow up immersed in a natural environment, there's there's an inherent understanding of how the world operates that doesn't come that comes from being a participant in it, in particular in being a participant in the natural world. So we're just going to
Oh
try to
yeah.
use a few words to like play around with things for a second, just because I'm so curious as to where it goes with you, which is, I think what I keep hearing happen is that you grow up in this environment where there's this relationship where you've cultivated, you've had to enter into relationship with the plants, you've had to enter a relationship with the animals, there's this like very close contact. Then you go off to university, and university, unfortunately, as you said, teaches you dominion. In order for you to do your job, landscape architect, garden designer, whatever it is, you are supposed to take the material you work with, which in this case are plants, and like be the master. And you're the one who's supposed to tell them like what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to be. And so therefore you think of like that's nature, and I am this thing outside of it. But in reality, especially when we're talking about regeneration and we're talking about like even what is kind of called low maintenance, which means I have to build relationships, right? I have to look at all the plants based on the needs and the desires of the person that I'm working with and say, okay, you person, I have to create an environment that has a series of relationships that allows these beings, which are all different plants, to grow in a healthy way, to reproduce on a regular basis, whether that's flowering, whether that's, producing fruit or any other kind of or vegetable or any of types of things. So you have to be healthy because they don't reproduce. Kin don't reproduce if they're not healthy, or if they're in the wrong environment, because you could have a beautiful, I don't know, banana tree in the middle of like the Valcusella where I live in Italy, and of course, the leaves are going to come out because plants are resilient as hell, but it's not going to put out a banana like it does in my friend's house in South Florida, right? Where she gets so many bananas that we have to like freeze. Her freezer becomes full of bananas. So you're creating relationships that are based on location, that are based on who's sitting next to you, who's growing with you, and all these different things. And so the only way you could really do that with it being low maintenance, this is my opinion only, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, is if you're talking about high maintenance, then yes, you could be in dominion, because at that point you control everything. I switch plants out, I artificially feed you, I artificially give you light, I do all these types of things, and I constrain you to grow however it is that I want you to grow. But low maintenance by nature means you are nature, because you have to know them so well. You have to be in that relationship that you can nudge them into like, I'm going to put you guys together, but then I'm going to step away and you're going to grow on your own. And so you can't really do that if you're dominion over them. Does that make, you understand what I'm trying to say?
Oh yeah, totally. I agree with that, and that's I think why the title of my book is 12 universal laws of nature. So it applies to your personal life, applies to nature. So yeah, I
Not
fully
nature, because you
fully
are nature.
agree.
It applies to the more than human world.
Well, yeah, but we are part of nature, so we have to still say
Exactly.
that it applies to nature.
I get
It's
that.
just a
Now I
way
get
of
it.
putting
Okay.
words.
I like it.
We still have to like words never come enough to explain a concept. They're always limiting, but we still have to find a way to communicate. And I still believe, like I said, that's what my clients want, low maintenance, and that's actually what they need as well. because you don't want to be spending hours and hours in maintaining, sitting on your knees, pulling the weeds. That's ridiculous. Like that makes no sense. So we can actually create that by understanding how nature works, which we are intrinsically part of. That's what I talk about in some of my social media, is that the Amazon rainforest is actually man-made. It's made by the indigenous that have selected trees, cut down trees, they added trees, they changed it, they bred them to be bigger, and that's why the Amazon rainforest is so. Well, it's not the only reason, but the humans definitely had an impact, as, such as how also animals have an impact on how plants grow. Like giraffes made acacia trees become different because they now have a certain scent that they can send signals. Oh, there's a giraffe coming. Uh, we have to start producing toxins in our leaves, otherwise we're going to be eaten. And they
Right.
communicate with each other. So we are part of nature, but we also influence nature, and nature influences us. Uh, so yeah, it's kind of
There's
this holistic way of looking at things. It becomes
I
quite
completely agree.
complicated, but at the same time, we have to take elements and make it abstract for people to understand. Because yeah, you could say that everything is always connected, and that it is true, but then we still have to get to the knowledge and apply it. And do some
Yeah.
work in your garden, just like animals do, and just like the indigenous people are yeah, crafting
Yes.
nature. You could almost say.
I want to tell you about this because I think you're going to find it fascinating. So I do this plant consciousness commentary on Fridays, which is where I break down the science, like papers, but I also comment on conferences and stuff like that. And one of the recent episodes that I did was commentary on a fantastic keynote by Emanuele Coccia from he did this really interesting talk during the Thinking with Plants and Fungi conference, where he talked about
Nice.
this concept that most people don't realize, that the Amazon are man-made. Like, in other words, humans are an integral part of what has created the Amazon. The Amazon, left without humans, would have had a very different way of being, but our presence as one of the animals present in the ecosystem has created it. And so he goes through this and he explains it to people, and he actually theorizes, which I find fascinating. His basically talk is, are cities the children of plants? Because his philosophy in understanding that the Amazon, starting with the Amazon as being human influenced, is that the humans had to, basically, the plants needed the humans to be around, needed the humans to do the things that humans can do, because we have two legs, we have two arms, because we hunt in a different way from a lion or a tiger or a bear or any other kind of, or a cougar or a coyote or any of this types of things. We have a
We're also
different,
cutting down some plants sometimes
exactly. We have
that
the
would be
ability to
crashing into the
cut.
rainforest.
Exactly. We have the ability to do all these things. So we're one of the animals that does very specific things like every other. And so therefore, the cities are created as ways to keep the humans nearby, so that the humans, so cities, of course, they've expanded into the urban sprawl that we think about, but even towns, which is a small city, is created, and a little, like all these little towns and all these little villages are really ways of the forest keeping humans close and allowing the
Hmm.
humans to have their own
Interesting.
kind of it's super fascinating when you start to think about it, because he then
I love it.
says, he exactly, so he talks about how, if we looked at the gardens inside of urban spaces as really the opposite, it's, rather than us having the nature close, it's the nature trying to keep us close, then
Hmm.
how would our cities look, or how would our garden spaces look? And he goes into this, it's a fascinating talk, so worth listening to. I've already heard it twice because it's just like there's so much in there to conceptualize. But he kind of keeps going back to the fact of when we remember that we're nature, but that we are, of course, having human, we have our own form. This is what I take from it. We have our own form and we have our own roles. What happens and how is it that we continue? How can we instead re embody those roles to have a relationship in our garden spaces with
Mm.
plants, but a relationship where it honors that I am human? So,
Yes.
sure, I have the ability to do certain things that other animals don't have the ability to do. Like you said, I can cut in a different way and I even eat in a very different way. And
Mm.
so it's like it redefines the relationship with the garden, right? Because it sort of it's as if we are now the children of the garden. We are,
Yeah.
and which is true, right? We are the ones that benefit to a certain extent from the garden, but not benefit in the perspective of the colonistic I take. But think of it as the garden is my parent, which is very similar. I did a project for my master's. My master's project was connected to Matera, which is a city in southern Italy. It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Like it's from the old time when we still lived when we were cave people, when we still lived in caves. And so when in the cave was the living part for the human, protection and all those things. But there was then a terrace, which was the area where the different caves connected so that people could unite. And the garden that existed there was the garden that was important for food, like, but not food as in like agriculture, because agriculture was outside of the city. It was more of the food for like a herb garden and little things that you need close to the kitchen. And then there was the
Mm.
pensile garden, the garden that was like above the caves. And that was the contemplation garden. The fact that plants,
Mm.
as our parents, needed us to contemplate, they needed for us to philosophize with them, to rest, to have this relationship of communication and exchange. And so that was the pensile garden that was above the so you had agriculture outside of the city, because that was the relationship where forest becomes, garden and all this. You had the garden really in the shared area, which was the shared things that we need for cooking, simple things that we needed for our everyday. And then you had the pensile, which was nature's way of staying in communion and continually like reminding us that we're part of nature, but our needs are to be in the caves. And so here's how we end up relating. And I loved this project so much. I actually have the images of what we designed here sitting kind of below me, because it made me realize when then I heard Emanuele's talk, I realized, oh my goodness, if I think of plants as my parents, then the relationship is so different. Yes, I take care of my parents in old age. Yes, I help my parents do things, but because that's how they nourish me, in all these other pieces. And they nourish me with their knowledge. And in the case of plants, with their bodies, with all these other aspects. It's still a concept I'm running through my mind, because it completely shifts the relationship of the garden to being our ancestors, our parents that are giving of us. And it's kind of closer to the indigenous wisdom of really looking at like the three sisters and the whole concept that these are my elders that are giving of their bodies and getting of their not life in order to nourish me. I went off on another rant, but I just love it so much. It's not a
Wow.
rant, I mean a tangent.
That's amazing because I think it reminds me of some research I read that the most biodiverse areas of the world are the pristine national parks, where you have
Hmm.
grazing animals, even hunting animals as well. But the other ones is the suburbs of cities, because everybody's growing different plants. There's even plants that are not necessarily indigenous, plants from all over the world mixed. You grow this, your neighbor grows something else,
Right.
and that's what really attracts a lot of wildlife as well. So from that perspective, or from a biology standpoint, it also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's really it helps shift us. And I think the work that people like you do that are important is to help the individuals who maybe grew up in a city and are afraid, because most of us are afraid of, like, I don't know how to grow something, I don't know how to do it, and yet I feel this call to have this relationship. And so I need I need the knowledge in order to start it right, to not make some of the errors that have been made in the past, and at the same time to create something that I can relate to and that I can continue to, nourish and have a relationship with over time. And I think that that's really what's most important about the kind of work that people like you do is you're almost like relationship builders. You're relationship builders, you're interspecies relationship builders.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm a relationship therapist as well. When I have a
Exactly.
couple and they can't agree on what they want for the garden, I have to like. But that's another story.
Yeah, you can have the plants though do it. You're like, okay, I want you both
Yeah,
to talk to
exactly.
this cucumber and let the cucumber help you, like guide you along the
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
it.
totally.
So Matthew, how I know that you've kind of like have a short window of time. How do people get in touch with you? How do they work with you and and such? Help people understand like where it is that you operate and how you operate.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So mostly, if you Google my name, you'll get to most of the social media platforms. I'm active on Instagram, where it's more like um, DIY garden tips and tricks and hacks and knowledge about regenerative gardening. And if you click through there, you can also get to a 30-minute free training. And if you like that, you can actually book a meeting with me through Calendly, and then I can see if I can help you or that if the masterclass is a fit for you. Like we'll have a conversation because I don't allow just anyone. You need to be like really ready to do the work because I need committed people because yeah, you need to absorb a lot. But interestingly enough, I find that knowledge part is quite easy. Okay, there's a lot of misinformation and wrong information, which is also very confusing. But I think the biggest benefit of coming into this community is like you're together with other like-minded people. You're learning from each other. We have a weekly group meeting. We get together. We talk plans and what works, what doesn't work, why are certain things not working, and a WhatsApp support group as well. And we just share. Yeah, I think this community and accountability aspect is really important. I think, in my opinion, that's probably the only businesses that are going to be left in the future, as already with AI, knowledge is readily available. Still, you need to know what to look for because today you can find anything. If you want to
Right,
believe in anything, you
exactly.
can find evidence for it. Um, so you still need to work with people that have the experience and the results. So
Right.
that's why I also created this masterclass. So yeah, that's Instagram. Then you can find me on LinkedIn as well, which is more about companies. I want companies to invest in their green space for their buildings or around their buildings mostly because there's a lot of research showing that people will stay working longer for you if you have a beautiful
Absolutely.
environment. They have the stress level goes down, retention is longer, so they won't quit their job as quickly. So a bunch of parameters that show that other than general value creation. So that's what we do there. TikTok is a bit like just random thoughts. And yeah, I think that's it. Facebook, you can also find me on Facebook, which is a bit of a mix. So yeah, that's where you can find me mostly.
Nice. Yeah, the whole, I mean, biophilic design and garden design and all these elements and really creating that interspecies way of being is so important. And that sense of awe, the wonder. There's so much scientific research that helps us better understand that our relationship to plants really nourishes us on every single level, right? On a physical level, on an emotional level, on a psychological level, like all these different pieces that help that when we have plants in close proximity, especially in areas that we don't normally have them, like an office environment, is it just changes. It's such a game changer. And I've seen companies that have done some amazing work to create that relationship and giving people more space for that contemplation, because again, that's where those great ideas come from, right? From that time when I allow myself to sit in the garden and to connect into the natural world, to feel that plantness of myself, to find my stillness, to find my centering, and to then be inspired by the awe and wonder that nature, the nature outside of me, that the more than human world offers. And then that triggers inside of me. And of course, that's where all the great ideas come from. So it makes sense that more and more companies are starting to invest in the creation of a beautiful space that is enriching their employees. Because I mean, really, who wants to work in a place that's just concrete and square walls? It's not fun at all. It's not healthy. So thank you so much, Matthew. This has been a really great conversation. I'm super happy that we had a chance to do it. I could probably talk and geek out about a bunch of stuff with you, because I have like all kinds
Yeah.
of nerdy biophilic design questions and landscape architect questions and super technical type of stuff. But I'm sure that
Yeah.
conversation will come at some point, especially
Yes.
because I've been out of the projects for a while. And so it's like sometimes I get to hear about them. It's like, ooh, what are people doing over here? And so I
Yeah.
always think that that's super fun. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing all of your knowledge. And of course, I'm going to include everything in the show notes. Do you have any last words of wisdom before I close everything off?
No, I think most important for the listeners is like, okay, if you want to get your hands dirty, do it. Try some stuff. If it works, good. Mostly people are stuck because they go to the garden center and buy plants that don't
Don't
grow.
do
So
that.
get expert
Don't do that.
knowledge because you want to get straight to it. So if you feel like I want to do it now, just go directly and book a meeting with me, and we'll see how I can help you the most. And I'm very excited to continue this conversation with you and see where it can overlap with what you're doing. Yeah, I
I
think
love
it's
it.
amazing you're bringing this knowledge into the world that is like a next step already of like how we as humans can go back to the Garden of Eden.
Thank you so much. Those are the beautiful words. And thank everybody who's listening. Go if you've been trying to understand what it takes to build a garden, go out and check out Matthew, get a bunch of his information, contact him, have a meeting. And because this is exactly what we need. We need to create relationships with our plants close to us. And a garden space is one of the most beautiful ways to do that. So if you enjoyed this episode, of course, remember to like and subscribe and share and, all that good stuff that you can do wherever it is that you're listening to it, because that gets more people informed and aware of the amazing work people like Matthew are doing. And of course, if you want to go deeper into these conversations, the Naturally Conscious community is the place to go, because this is a ecosystem online that is completely dedicated to human plant relationships. So, with that, remember to resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. That's it. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom. To continue these conversations, join us in the Naturally Conscious community, your premier online ecosystem for plant reawakening and accelerated evolution and co-creation with other kin. Here, you'll find expansive discussions, interactive courses, live events, and supportive group programs like the Plant Wisdom Book Club and the Sprouts Writing and Creativity Group. Connect with like-minded individuals collaborating with plants to integrate these insights into life. Intro and outro music by Steve Shuley and Poinsettia from The Singing Life of Plants. That's it for me, Tigria Gardenia, and my plant collaborators. Until next time, remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. I'm out. Bye.